thoughts, views, and opinions you hear on this show are just that: my thoughts, my views, my opinions. So if you don't like them, disagree with them, or whatever the case may be, well, there's a simple solution to all that, and that's just stop listening. But if you care to partake in the conversation, sit back, turn it up, and enjoy the show. Yeah, that.
Despite what you believe, something unfortunate like that should bring people together. You know what I mean? One side is preaching like freedom of speech, but then when people who you aren't fond of practice what you're preaching, which is freedom of speech, then you throw a fit. A 17-year-old died because as they're getting pulled on the table, they got flung into a pole. Welcome back to another episode of the Yeah That Podcast, hosted by yours truly, West Coast Robbie. Thank you. How are y'all doing out there? I hope y'all are doing well, because the homie's doing well. Back with another episode. And before we start the new episode, we got to recap the last episode. Episode 85. It was a Yeah That Podcast classic that we recorded a few years ago. And I just wanted to bring it to light. We had a special guest, and Miss Angelique Godwin. And my apologies, I was saying Angelique Young last week prior to the episode. That was her name at that point when we were recording, but she has since changed her name. But we revisited the episode with Miss Angelique Godwin, entrepreneur, activist, motivational speaker, transgender woman. And we talked about what life was like when she knew it was right to live the life she decided to live, her endeavors, etc., etc. So if you haven't listened to that, check it out wherever podcast episodes are available, and that's every podcast platform, and on YouTube, Audible, etc. The whole nine. We're everywhere, yo, everywhere. But now we're back with another episode 86. How are you doing? I am doing well. Been busy. Excuse me. Been busy. You think, one of your kids goes off to college, and, you think like, okay, tempo's about to slow down a little bit, but, my youngest is still in the house, and she's very active with her sports, doing multiple sports at the currently this season, and we're pretty damn busy. Between her two sports that she's doing, bouncing between the two games, and then going to collegiate games to see my oldest daughter play. Man, we're all over the place, but wouldn't trade it for the world. Oh man, especially with what we got going on in this world, man. This world is crazy. You know what I'm saying? But with that being said, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff as of late. I took some time off of social media due to what happened with the unfortunate murder of influencer, activist. But I don't know, I wasn't liking what I was seeing online. It really split our community. And I mean community, as the people of the United States of America. It really has divided us. There was already tension between the two sides, quote unquote, red side, blue side, whatever. But it just kind of escalated with the untimely murder. And, despite what you believe, something unfortunate like that should bring people together. You know what I mean? And I wasn't liking what I was seeing online. So I was like, man, I'm getting off. So I was off for a few days, took some time off or whatever. And just kind of really reassessing and thinking about your own life and like what's really important to you. You know what I'm saying? I'm having some technical difficulties, so excuse me for the lack of continuity in this motherfucker. But we're just gonna continue. So, as I was saying, just the hypocrisy with what was going on, and due to that tragic event, and one side is preaching like freedom of speech, but then when people who you aren't fond of practice what you're preaching, which is freedom of speech, then you throw a fit. Which leads me to the example of Jimmy Kimmel. So, Jimmy Kimmel came on his show, the Live with Jimmy Kimmel night show, or whatever his show's name is. And he had some comments about the tragic incident with Charlie Kirk and whatnot. And he was suspended due to the comments. The Trump administration had their inputs. Trump put out something in a tweet talking about good for you, ABC. Next up is Jimmy Fallon and for Seth Meyers saying Jimmy Kimmel's not funny, etc., etc. Now, mind you, I agree with Trump in that aspect. Jimmy Kimmel is not funny. I'm not a fan of Jimmy Kimmel. I don't fuck with him. However, all he was doing was exercising his right of freedom of speech. Now, that's just that part right there. That's something that bothers me, because you're preaching freedom of speech, but then because you're not a fan of this person who is doing their same thing, using their right of freedom of speech, then it's an issue, which is crazy. I don't like the hypocrisy. That's the whole reason why I was like, the whole debate and the tension between the two sides, it was really like embarrassing, because it's like, you guys are getting at people for exercising their right to freedom of speech when the person who was unfortunately taken away was known for his freedom of speech. You know what I mean? For exercising his right. So Jimmy Kimmel was suspended because of comments, which they may have came too soon, which they probably did. So, Next Star, who is ABC and Disney, falls under that umbrella, suspended Jimmy Kimmel because of the monologue of the show that referenced Charlie Kirk. So since then, it was about a week or so, Jimmy Kimmel has been reinstated. He has since apologized. Upon his return, he apologized for the comments, not meaning to offend anybody with the comments. And, President Trump, of course, is threatening to sue ABC for the reinstatement of Jimmy Kimmel, which is crazy to me, because it's like, how many presidents have you known to sue people? Like, what? Where do they do that at? 40 stations are still not showing the Jimmy Kimmel show. And, he apologized. He came out and he was crying. He shouted out Charlie Kirk's widow. And, he gave her props for, how she is carrying herself and the things she's doing since her fallen husband. But I don't know, that whole situation was kind of funny to me in regards to him being suspended and then people flipping out because of the freedom of speech thing. The reason Next Star, they said the reason they suspended Jimmy Kimmel is because they didn't want it to escalate into something greater. So I don't know. It was a logical move for them to suspend him, but Oh, me personally, I'm not a fan of Jimmy Kimmel. However, he was just exercising his right of freedom of speech, literally doing what his a right. In 2020, Jimmy Kimmel, he had, or he did, blackface. For those of you who didn't know, he got a lot of scrutiny for doing blackface for his impersonations of Oprah Winfrey, and Karl Malone while he was a co-host on The Man Show back in 2020. And he's come back since, apologized for that. And that's what kind of rubbed me the wrong way with him too. I was like, you're not thinking, bro. So you're not thinking when it came to the blackface stuff. You just offended a lot of people because his apology he comes out and he says it's never my intention to offend people, but you're not thinking. So with the blackface stuff, you weren't thinking. You didn't think this was going to offend black people. And then you come on and you have your monologue about Charlie Kirk. Like, you know how people felt about that man? And it was like, oh, it was too soon, too sensitive of a subject. But and to make it clear, I'm not a fan or a follower of Charlie Kirk, but what's wrong is wrong and what's right is right. You know what I mean? Clear, cut, and dry. So that's my take of it. At the end of the day, Jimmy Kimmel he was exercising his right to freedom of speech. And I don't know, people just wanted him hemmed up for what he said. But y'all really got to think about what y'all are talking about. But that's all I'm going to say about that topic. Because they're hemming people up for even speaking on anything and exercising their right to freedom of speech on how they feel about stuff. So it's kind of crazy, man. It's kind of like do as I say, not as I do type deal. And that's not what we're about. That's not what Constitution is. That's not what laws are about. So come on now. But on a lighter note, like I said, well, actually it's not a lighter note because y'all need to calm down with TikTok, man. Y'all gotta calm down with TikTok. So, we got our majority, the American, who's getting ready to be a majority owner for TikTok. So there's been a lot of TikTok trends going on, and people are really wanting to be viral, and they're going to extremes that are kind of idiotic, and they're trying to start trends. But these trends are detrimental to people and their lives. For example, there was a table slide trend going around where a folding table is flipped upside down. Somebody's sitting on the table. It's hooked up to a car and the car's driving to a parking lot. So that being said, a 17-year-old died because as they're getting pulled on the table, they got flung into a pole. Their friend is now being charged with second-degree manslaughter. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. There's also a car surfing trend. I don't know if you've seen these videos on TikTok. I haven't seen any of them. I just caught wind of them the other day. So did my research. There's also a car surfing trend going on where people are standing on top of vehicles as they're being driven, hanging out of car windows, sunroofs, etc., etc. And a 19-year-old fell off the car and received permanent brain damage. The friend who was driving the car is being charged with aggravated assault. Unfortunate. Crazy. So for all you youngsters out there, man, trying to get to be viral, get famous, whatever the case may be smart about it. Be smart about it, man. Think about everything. Think about what you're doing, pros and cons, what can happen. You know what I'm saying? Think about all that shit. But with that being said, man, I had a lot of technical difficulties with this episode. So if it sounds a little choppy, my apologies, y'all. My apologies. But make sure you do your part. You like, subscribe on YouTube, If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe, like it, leave a comment. If you're listening to this audio version only, make sure you rate the podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, Audible. Rate it. Podbean, you know what I'm saying? Hook the homie up. But make sure you support, follow on Instagram, instagram.com / or at Yeah That Podcast. On TikTok, the same thing, at Yeah That Podcast. Show your support, just like you share your celebrities' favorite posts or reels or whatever the case may be. Do the same for your homies, man. But with that being said, it's homie West Coast Rob signing out. Till the next episode. Yeah, that. West Coast Rob.